Welcome. There is nothing to do now but rest. Let your shoulders sink into whatever is holding you. Let your breath find its own unhurried rhythm. Nothing here requires your attention, only your presence, and even that can drift as it likes. Tonight we will move through the long, slow story of the human body in time. Aging is defined as the progressive loss of physiological function over time. Every organism that lives long enough experiences this same quiet arithmetic. Cells that once repaired themselves swiftly begin to lag. Systems that once balanced perfectly begin to drift out of tune. It is not an illness, but a slow reshaping present in every living thing that measures its life in years. All cells accumulate molecular damage over time. Inside every one of them, tiny errors gather like dust settling on a shelf. Proteins fold incorrectly. Genetic instructions blur at their edges. Most of this damage is repaired almost instantly, unnoticed, forgotten. But across decades, a small fraction remains, layering quietly beneath the surface of every tissue in the body. Human lifespan has roughly doubled in the past 150 years. A child born in the 1870s could expect, on average, a life half as long as one born today. This shift happened faster than evolution could ever move. It came instead from clean water, from vaccines, from simple hand washing, from knowledge quietly passed from one generation to the next. Life expectancy gains historically came mostly from reduced infant mortality. It was not that adults began living dramatically longer lives. It was that so many more children survived to become adults at all. Each surviving infant raised the average enormously, even while the natural ceiling of human life stayed largely unmoved. The story of longer lives began quietly in the nursery. Maximum human lifespan has changed little despite longer average lifespan. More people now reach old age than ever before, yet the outer edge of human life has barely shifted across centuries. Medicine has widened the crowd that reaches 80 or 90. It has not yet widened the horizon much beyond that. The ceiling remains almost exactly where it always was. The oldest verified human lived to 122 years. Her name was Jean Calment, a French woman who was born in 1875 and died in 1997. She outlived nearly everyone from her own generation, and most of the generation after it too. Her long life remains, decades later, the outer edge of everything we know about human endurance. Women outlive men in nearly every country on Earth. The gap varies by place and era, but it appears almost everywhere it has been measured. Biology offers some of the explanation, hormonal and genetic. Behavior and circumstance offer the rest. Across cultures and centuries, the pattern holds with quiet, remarkable consistency. Aging rates differ significantly between individuals of the same chronological age. Two people born in the same year can carry very different bodies inside. One may move like someone a decade younger. Another may carry the wear of a decade more. The calendar counts years evenly, but the body keeps its own private, uneven record. Telomeres shorten with each cell division. At the tips of every chromosome sit these small protective caps, like the plastic ends of a shoelace. Every time a cell divides, its telomeres grow slightly shorter. Eventually, after enough divisions, they wear thin enough that the cell can no longer safely copy itself. It is one of the body's oldest, quietest clocks. Let the next breath arrive on its own, without any effort from you. Notice how the exhale can stretch a little longer than the inhale, like a wave pulling back from shore. Each breath after this one may come even slower, deeper, less urgent than the last. There is no pace to keep, no rhythm to perform. Only the air moving in and settling out, and the body growing heavier with each release. Cellular senescence takes a cell out of the business of dividing, though it does not switch the cell off. The cell keeps working, keeps consuming, keeps producing, it simply stops copying itself. Biologists once thought of this as a kind of retirement. Now it looks more like a cell standing guard, present but frozen mid-task, neither dying nor renewing. Senescent cells release a cocktail of molecules known as SAS, short for senescence, associated secretory phenotype. These signals drift outward into nearby tissue, calling in immune cells and stirring low-level inflammation. In small amounts, this can help heal a wound. Left too long, the same signals spread wear to neighboring healthy cells, like a single cracked tile, slowly loosening the ones beside it. Mitochondria, the tiny structures that turn food into usable energy, grow less efficient with age. Their inner membranes fold less cleanly. Their output of energy slows, while their production of stray reactive molecules rises. A muscle cell in youth might hum along on abundant power. The same cell decades later runs on a dimmer, less steady current. Damage to DNA never fully stops accumulating, and neither does the body's effort to repair it. But over time, the balance tips. Ultraviolet light, ordinary metabolism, even the simple passage of years, all leave small breaks and errors in the genetic code. Repair enzymes patch what they can, tirelessly, cell after cell. Eventually, the backlog grows faster than the mending. Genes themselves rarely change with age, but how loudly or softly they are read does. This is epigenetics, the chemical tags and folds that decide which instructions a cell actually follows. Over decades, some genes once kept carefully silent begin to speak. Others, once active, begin to fade. The instruction manual stays the same. The bookmarks move. Deep within bone marrow and other tissues, reserves of stem cells slowly diminish in both number and vigor. These are the cells meant to replace what wears out: new blood, new skin, new lining for the gut. In youth, the reserve feels almost endless. With age, fewer remain, and those that do respond a little slower to the body's call. Proteins fold into precise three-dimensional shapes to do their work, and with age, more of them fold incorrectly. A misfolded protein can clump together with others, forming small tangles the cell struggles to clear. Some of these tangles are familiar from certain neurological diseases, though most pass unnoticed for years. The cell's shape, making machinery, once flawless, grows a little less exact. The cell's own cleanup process, called autophagy, slows its pace with age. Under this system, worn components are gathered, broken down, and recycled into fresh material. In youth, this housekeeping runs efficiently, clearing debris almost as fast as it forms. Later in life, the process lags and small amounts of waste begin to linger longer than they once did. A low simmer of inflammation runs quietly through the aging body, a pattern researchers call inflammaging. It is not the sharp inflammation of an injury, but a persistent background hum, fed partly by senescent cells and their signals. Over years, this steady low heat wears on tissues throughout the body, from blood vessels to joints, like a stove left on low far longer than intended. The immune system loses some of its precision as the years accumulate. The thymus, where young defender cells are trained, shrinks steadily after childhood, producing far fewer new recruits. Existing immune cells grow slower to recognize threats, and some begin to malfunction, forgetting the difference between friend and foe. This gradual fading of vigilance is called immunosenescence, and it helps explain why illnesses that were once minor can grow more serious later in life. Let your shoulders release their grip on the day, one side and then the other. Feel the weight of your arms settle fully into the mattress, heavier than they were a moment ago. Let that same heaviness travel down through your hips, your legs, your heels, as though the bed were slowly rising to meet you. There is no need to hold any part of yourself up right now. Everything can simply rest where it lands. Messages between cells grow harder to send as tissues age. Healthy cells rely on constant chemical conversation. Tiny signals passed like notes between neighbors, coordinating repair and growth. With age, some of these signals grow distorted, sent too often, too rarely, or in the wrong dialect entirely. Nearby cells begin to misread each other's intentions, and the coordinated rhythm that once kept tissues working in harmony starts to falter. A nutrient-sensing pathway called mTOR helps set the pace of aging itself. It acts like an internal gauge, reading how much food is available and adjusting growth and repair accordingly. When nutrients are abundant, mTOR favors rapid growth over long-term maintenance. Laboratories studying this pathway across many species have found that dialing down its activity often extends lifespan, hinting that the body's own growth signals may quietly shape how long it lasts. Caloric restriction reliably extends lifespan across many laboratory species. Mice, worms, and yeast fed measurably less without malnutrition often live longer and show fewer signs of age-related decline. The effect appears linked to slower nutrient, sensing activity, and reduced cellular stress. In humans, the picture remains less certain, though early studies suggest similar biological shifts, offering a modest window into how food intake and longevity might quietly intertwine. Researchers grouped the many drivers of aging into a framework called the hallmarks of aging. 12 interconnected mechanisms make up this map, from shortened telomeres to failing mitochondria, from genetic instability to inflammation. Each hallmark influences the others, forming a web rather than a simple chain. The framework, refined over recent years, gives scientists a shared language for understanding how so many small biological threads weave into the larger pattern of growing old. Certain cells, especially neurons, are formed early in life and rarely divide again, aging along a different path than most tissues. Skin cells, blood cells, and gut linings renew themselves constantly, replacing damage with fresh copies. Neurons instead must last for decades, repairing themselves in place rather than being replaced. This long-term durability makes them remarkable, though it also means the damage they accumulate has nowhere else to go. Aging affects organs at different rates within the same person. A person's skin might show years of visible wear, while their heart remains remarkably resilient, or the reverse might be true. Genetics, lifestyle, and simple chance all shape which tissues weather time more gracefully. This uneven pace means that chronological age often tells only part of the story, while the body itself keeps a more varied, more personal record. Skin ages differently from internal organs, shaped heavily by exposure to sunlight rather than time alone. Ultraviolet light breaks down collagen and elastin fibers, producing lines and looseness far earlier than internal aging would suggest. A patch of skin shielded from the sun for decades can look remarkably youthful compared to skin exposed daily. In this way, skin carries a visible record not just of years lived, but of light absorbed. Bone density loss accelerates markedly after the age of 50. Bone tissue is constantly rebuilt throughout life, but the balance between breakdown and renewal shifts as hormone levels change with age. Women often experience a sharper decline after menopause, as estrogen's protective effect fades. Over the following decades, once dense lattices of bone become more porous, a quiet architectural change happening deep beneath skin that never shows on the surface. Muscle mass declines by an estimated 3 to 8% per decade after the age of 30. Muscle fibers shrink and their number slowly falls, especially in tissue that once powered fast, forceful movement. Physical activity can slow this decline considerably, though it rarely stops it completely. What remains striking is how much of this loss stays hidden, felt only as a gradual softening of strength most people barely notice year to year. Cardiovascular stiffening stands as one of the clearest hallmarks of vascular aging. Arteries that were once elastic, expanding and relaxing with each heartbeat, gradually thicken and lose some of their flexibility. This change forces the heart to work harder to push blood through a system less willing to yield. Blood pressure often rises as a result, a slow shift in the body's inner architecture that unfolds far beneath any outward sign. Somewhere in the walls around you, a house settles into the night. A pipe ticks. A beam exhales the last warmth of the day. Wind moves past the window in long, unhurried breaths, arriving and fading again. You don't need to listen closely. Just let these small, far-off sounds pass through the room like tide, each one dissolving before the next one comes, while your body sinks a little heavier into the mattress beneath it. Cognitive decline in aging varies far more than most people expect, and it is nowhere close to universal. Memory, reasoning, and processing speed can shift at very different rates from one person to another, even among those born the same year. Many older adults maintain sharp thinking well into their 80s and beyond, their minds shaped more by lifestyle, education, and genetics than by the calendar alone. The mind, it seems, keeps its own uneven clock. Certain tissues in the human body contain almost no living cells capable of renewal, and the lens of the eye is among the strangest examples. Its fibers form early in life and remain largely unchanged afterward, accumulating protein layers the way a tree adds rings. There is no replacement crew arriving to refresh this tissue over time. This is part of why the lens gradually stiffens and yellows, a slow transparency lost simply because nothing there was built to be replaced. Naked mole rats show almost none of the typical signs of aging seen in other mammals. Their bodies maintain steady metabolic rates, stable bone density, and consistent cognitive performance across most of their unusually long lives. Even their cells resist the usual decline in function that marks the passage of time elsewhere in nature. Biologists studying them describe something closer to a plateau than a decline, as though time moves differently beneath their skin. Naked mole rats also rarely develop cancer, a resistance that continues to intrigue biologists studying cellular aging. Their cells produce a unique sugar-based molecule that seems to prevent overcrowding and uncontrolled growth. Tumors that might otherwise take hold in other mammals simply fail to establish themselves in mole rat tissue. Their biology, in this sense, appears to have found a quiet defense that much of the animal kingdom has never discovered. Greenland sharks may live for more than 400 years, drifting through cold Arctic waters longer than most nations have existed. Their growth is astonishingly gradual, sometimes less than a centimeter added each year. Researchers estimate their age by studying proteins in the lens of the eye, a tissue that, much like our own, never renews itself. Somewhere in the deep, dark ocean tonight, a shark born centuries ago may still be moving slowly through the current. Bowhead whales can live beyond 200 years, gliding through Arctic seas at a pace that outlasts generations of the people who study them. Harpoon fragments from centuries past have been found embedded in the bodies of living whales, quiet evidence of lifetimes stretched across historical eras. Their cells appear to resist the usual buildup of damage far better than most mammals. In their slow, patient movement through icy water, they seem to carry time itself differently than we do. A jellyfish known as Turritopsis dohrnii carries an ability found almost nowhere else in the animal kingdom. It can reverse its own life cycle. When injured or stressed, its cells can revert to an earlier developmental stage, effectively returning the creature to something like its youthful form. This process can, in theory, repeat many times, allowing individuals to cycle backward through stages of life rather than moving only forward. Scientists sometimes call it, with quiet wonder, the immortal jellyfish. Deep along rocky Pacific shelves, certain rockfish species show almost no measurable decline as the decades pass. Their organs, their skin, even their reproductive capacity remain remarkably stable for 100 years or more. Biologists call this negligible senescence, a state where the usual signs of wear simply fail to accumulate in the expected way. A fish born before a great-grandparent's birth might still be swimming, unchanged, through the same cold water today. High on wind-carved mountain slopes, bristlecone pines have stood for more than 4,000 years. Their wood grows twisted and sparse, shaped by thin air and brutal winters that would kill most trees outright. Growth rings inside their trunks record droughts and centuries no living person witnessed. A single tree standing today may have already been ancient when the first pyramids were completed. Bats live far longer than their small bodies would predict, some species surviving 3 or 4 decades in the wild. A creature the size of a mouse would typically be expected to live only a few years. Researchers studying bat cells have found unusually efficient repair systems and a resistance to the cellular damage that shortens life in similarly sized mammals. Their long lives, tucked into caves and hollow trees, remain an active area of biological curiosity. Let warmth begin somewhere small, perhaps at the center of your chest, and let it spread outward from there. Feel it move into your shoulders, loosening what the day left tight. Let it drift down through your arms, into your hands, until your fingers rest without effort. Let it pool in your stomach, then travel down through your legs, all the way to your feet, until your whole body feels warm, heavy, and unhurried, sinking further into rest. Larger animals often live longer than smaller ones, a pattern visible across elephants, whales, and tortoises, yet exceptions appear at every turn. A tiny bat may outlive a much larger rabbit. A small rockfish may outlast an animal many times its size. Body size offers a rough guide to lifespan, but biology rarely follows a single rule without also breaking it somewhere else. Metabolic rate appears loosely connected to how long a species tends to live. Animals with slower metabolisms, like tortoises, often endure for many decades, while creatures with racing metabolisms, like shrews, burn through life quickly. The relationship isn't precise, and plenty of fast-metabolizing species defy it entirely. Still, something in the pace of an animal's inner chemistry seems tied, faintly, to the pace of its aging. A rare condition called progeria causes some children to age at an accelerated pace, their bodies showing signs typically seen much later in life. The condition arises from a single mutation in a gene responsible for a structural protein inside the cell's nucleus. Children with progeria may develop stiffened joints, thinning skin, and cardiovascular changes usually associated with advanced age. Their bodies, moving through childhood, seem to travel through decades of biological time far faster than the calendar suggests. Studying progeria has reshaped how biologists understand ordinary aging in everyone else. The damaged protein involved, called lamin A, plays a role in maintaining the structure of the cell's nucleus even in people without the condition. Traces of similarly misshapen proteins appear, in smaller amounts, in aging cells throughout the general population. What began as research into a rare childhood illness has become a window into the machinery of aging itself. Genetic studies of centenarians often reveal shared variants linked to more efficient DNA repair. These variations don't guarantee long life, but they appear more frequently among people who live past 100 than among the general population. Their cells seem better equipped to correct small errors before those errors accumulate into larger problems. It hints that some of the longest lives may be built, in part, on quietly resilient molecular machinery. Certain regions of the world, known as blue zones, hold unusually high numbers of people living past 100. Places like Okinawa, Sardinia, and the Nicoya Peninsula share patterns of plant-rich diets, steady physical movement, and strong social connection. Researchers studying these communities have found no single secret, but rather a combination of small, sustained habits repeated across a lifetime. Their long lives seem woven from ordinary days lived in a particular, steady rhythm. Daily habits leave a measurable trace on how fast the body ages beneath the surface. People who eat mostly plants, move often, and sleep well tend to show slower biological aging than their calendar years would suggest. Researchers tracking these patterns have found that muscle strength, inflammation levels, and even blood pressure respond to sustained lifestyle choices. None of it stops time, but it appears to change the pace at which the body wears. In the 2010s, a biologist named Steve Horvath introduced a method for reading age directly from the chemistry of DNA. Tiny chemical tags, called methylation marks, accumulate on our genes in patterns that shift with the years. By reading thousands of these marks together, his method estimates a person's biological age with striking precision. Two people born the same year can carry very different readings, as if their cells kept separate calendars. These epigenetic clocks have proven better at forecasting mortality risk than a person's actual birth date. Two people of identical chronological age might carry biological readings years apart, and the gap tends to predict health outcomes more reliably than age alone. It suggests that the number written on a birth certificate captures far less than the chemistry unfolding within the cells themselves. The body, it turns out, keeps its own private record. Clinical biochemistry is moving toward blood tests that read the speed of aging from a single sample. Levels of certain proteins, inflammatory markers, and metabolic byproducts shift in predictable ways as tissues wear down over time. Laboratories are refining panels that combine dozens of these signals into one composite score. What once required years of observation may soon be glimpsed within a few drops drawn from a vein. Let your attention settle on something far simpler than any of this. Picture a candle burning down in a still room, its flame growing low and golden, the wax pooling without hurry. There is no wind to disturb it, no reason for it to flicker faster than it wants to. Let your breath match that unhurried burn, each inhale a little dimmer, each exhale sinking you further into the dark around the light. Rest here, in that fading glow, for as long as you need. In laboratories around the world, a compound called rapamycin has extended lifespan across mice, flies, and yeast alike. It works by quieting a growth signaling pathway known as mTOR, which cells rely on to decide when to grow and when to conserve resources. Slowing that pathway appears to shift cells toward maintenance and repair rather than constant expansion. The effect has held across species separated by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Metformin, a medication long prescribed for type 2 diabetes, is now being studied for effects that extend well beyond blood sugar. Observational studies have noticed that diabetic patients taking metformin sometimes outlive non-diabetic peers who don't take it, an unexpected pattern that caught researchers' attention. Clinical trials are now testing whether the drug might influence aging itself, not merely one disease. The evidence remains early, but the curiosity it has sparked is considerable. Senolytic drugs work by seeking out senescent cells and clearing them from aging tissue. In animal studies, these compounds have selectively triggered the death of cells that had stopped dividing but lingered, releasing inflammatory signals into their surroundings. Healthy neighboring cells appear largely untouched by the process. It is a targeted kind of cleanup, removing the lingering residue of old cellular damage rather than treating the tissue as a whole. Mice treated with senolytic drugs have shown longer, more active lives compared to untreated animals of the same age. Their fur regained some shine, their movement stayed steadier, and markers of tissue damage declined measurably. Researchers have observed improvements not just in lifespan, but in the quality of the years that follow treatment. The results have encouraged interest in whether similar approaches might someday help aging human tissue as well. NAD precursor supplements are marketed with the promise of restoring energy production inside aging cells. Nadprion is a molecule that mitochondria rely on to convert nutrients into usable energy, and its levels tend to decline with age. Supplement makers suggest that raising NAD-PRU through precursors like nicotinamide riboside might counter that decline. Human evidence remains limited, though early trials continue to explore whether the promise matches the biology. Reprogramming a cell means coaxing it back toward a younger state, and researchers have done exactly that inside aging mouse cells. By briefly activating a small set of reprogramming factors, scientists watched worn cellular markers fade, as if a clock inside the cell had been nudged backward without erasing its identity. The cell kept its purpose, its role in skin or muscle, yet carried itself with a fresher signature. It's an early glimpse of biological time, behaving less like a one-way street. Klotho is a protein named after a figure who spins the thread of life, and it seems to earn that name in the brain as well as the body. When researchers raised Klotho levels in mice, memory and learning improved measurably, as though the protein were tuning neural circuits toward sharper performance. The effect appeared even in animals that weren't otherwise impaired, suggesting Klotho's influence reaches beyond simply preventing decline. Its exact mechanism inside human minds remains an open question, but the pattern in mice has been consistent enough to hold attention. Parabiosis joins the circulatory systems of two animals, one young and one old, allowing their blood to mix and mingle. In these experiments, tissues in the older animal that had grown stiff or slow began to behave more youthfully, as though something carried in young blood were coaxing old cells back into better habits. Muscle repaired faster, and certain organs showed renewed function. No one yet knows precisely which factors in the blood are responsible, though the search for them continues with real momentum. Movement itself turns out to trigger some of the same molecular shifts that scientists chase with pills and compounds. Muscles under exertion release signaling molecules that echo the effects seen with certain longevity drugs, nudging cells toward better repair and cleaner energy use. A brisk walk or a session of resistance training seems to speak the same biochemical language as a laboratory intervention, at least in part. The body, it turns out, has always carried a version of this medicine within its own motion. Fasting, mimicking diets allow the body to believe it is fasting while still receiving carefully measured nutrients. Under this gentle deception, cells activate autophagy, the internal process that clears out damaged proteins and worn components. Researchers have linked this cleanup process to markers of longevity across several organisms, from yeast to mice. The body, prompted by the diet's design, seems to use the resulting quiet stretch of scarcity as an opportunity to tidy itself from within. Let your jaw loosen now, just slightly, the way it does in the deepest part of sleep. Feel the small muscles around your eyes release, layer by layer, until your eyelids rest with no more effort than a leaf resting on still water. Behind your closed eyes, there is only warm darkness, wide and undemanding. Nothing there is asking anything of you. Let your face become still, unguarded, and let that stillness spread downward, like warmth settling into a held breath. Gene therapy delivers new instructions directly into an organism's cells, and in mice, this approach has already stretched lifespan by adjusting several aging pathways at once. Rather than targeting a single mechanism, these treatments work on multiple fronts simultaneously, addressing inflammation, cellular repair, and metabolic balance together. The animals treated this way have lived measurably longer than their untreated littermates. It's a reminder that aging rarely has one lever, and treatments that pull several at once may prove more effective than those pulling just one. CRISPR allows scientists to edit genetic material with striking precision, cutting and correcting damaged sequences, much like a careful hand repairing torn fabric. Researchers are exploring whether this tool might fix the small accumulated errors that build up in our genes as we age. Early experiments have shown promise in correcting specific age-related mutations in laboratory settings. Whether this precision can be applied safely and broadly across an aging human body remains a question still being worked out, one careful trial at a time. Stem cells serve as the body's reserve of renewal, capable of becoming many different cell types as tissues wear down. With age, this reserve dwindles, leaving fewer cells available to replace what has been lost. Stem cell therapies aim to restock that supply, introducing fresh cells intended to rebuild tissue that the body can no longer replenish on its own. Early applications have focused on cartilage, blood disorders, and certain degenerative conditions, with broader uses still under careful study. 3-dimensional printing, once reserved for plastic prototypes, is now being adapted to build living tissue layer by layer. Researchers have already printed small structures resembling blood vessels, skin, and simple organ tissue using cells suspended in a supportive gel. The hope is that someday whole organs might be printed to order, replacing ones worn down by age or disease. The technology remains far from that scale today, but the early architecture of the idea is already visible under laboratory light. Young blood, young tissue, young organs. Researchers are asking whether a transplant from a younger donor might do more than replace a failing part. Early observations suggest that surrounding tissue sometimes shifts toward younger patterns after receiving such an organ, as though proximity itself carries influence. The effect, if real, would extend far beyond the transplanted piece. Systemic rejuvenation from a single graft remains an open hypothesis, tested carefully across transplant registries and animal studies alike. Pigs, genetically modified to be more compatible with human bodies, have become central to a field called xenotransplantation. The shortage of human donor organs has pushed scientists toward this cross-species solution, editing animal genomes to reduce rejection risk. Early trials have already tested pig hearts and kidneys in human patients, with mixed but instructive results. If perfected, this approach could ease one of medicine's oldest bottlenecks: not enough organs for everyone who needs one. Billions of dollars now flow into laboratories dedicated to slowing, or someday stopping, human aging. What began as a niche academic pursuit has become a recognized industry, drawing venture capital, biotech startups, and pharmaceutical giants alike. Longevity has become a category of its own, with dedicated funds and specialized research campuses. The scale of investment suggests a growing belief that aging itself might be a target worth pursuing, not merely its downstream diseases. Dozens of companies compete for a singular milestone: the first medicine ever officially approved to treat aging as its own condition. Each pursues a different mechanism, from cellular cleanup to metabolic tuning, hoping their candidate crosses the regulatory finish line first. None has yet succeeded, though several are approaching late-stage trials. The race carries weight beyond commerce. The first approval would mark a formal shift in how medicine defines the aging process itself. Aging itself does not yet appear on any official list of treatable diseases. Regulatory agencies require a specific condition, a measurable illness, before approving a drug meant to address it. This creates a quiet obstacle for longevity researchers who must frame their treatments around named diseases like diabetes or heart failure rather than aging in general. The distinction is administrative, not biological, yet it shapes how progress moves through approval systems worldwide. Modern trials increasingly measure success not by curing a single illness, but by tracking a person's biological age itself. Blood markers, cellular signatures, and molecular clocks now serve as evidence that a treatment is working even before any specific disease outcome appears. This shift lets researchers study broad, systemic aging rather than narrow conditions. It represents a quiet but significant change in how medicine defines progress against time. Let your breath find its own unhurried rhythm now. No need to shape it, only to notice it. Each inhale arrives on its own, and each exhale lasts a little longer than the one before, like a wave drawing back further into the sea. There is no place this breath needs to go, no task waiting at its end. Let it lengthen, let it soften, let the next one come whenever it wants to. Your body already knows how to rest. A trial known by researchers as TAME set out to test something unusual, whether a decades-old diabetes medicine, metformin, could delay the onset of age-related disease in people without diabetes at all. If successful, it would mark one of the first large human studies designed explicitly around aging as the target, rather than any single illness. The trial's design itself became a landmark, influencing how future longevity studies might be structured and evaluated. Wealthy technology entrepreneurs have poured considerable personal fortunes into longevity research, treating aging as a solvable engineering problem rather than an inevitable fact of life. Their funding has launched independent laboratories, private research institutes, and ambitious moonshot programs outside traditional academic structures. This influx of capital has accelerated certain lines of research dramatically, though it has also raised questions about which goals receive attention and which do not. Some scientists argue that living longer and living well are not the same goal, and should be pursued separately rather than assumed to arrive together. A person might gain extra years yet spend many of them in frailty, while another might live a shorter span in vigorous health throughout. This distinction has reshaped research priorities, pushing some laboratories to measure healthy years lived rather than years alone. The difference, subtle but important, may decide what kind of future longer life actually creates. Compression of morbidity describes a goal quietly different from simple longevity, shortening the span of illness before death, rather than only lengthening life itself. The idea holds that most years should be lived in strength, with decline arriving late and briefly, almost at the very end. Researchers picture a curve where health stays high, then falls only near life's final edge. It reframes the question from how long to how well for how much of that time. Health span. The years lived in good health still trails behind total lifespan in nearly every country on Earth. People are living longer, yet often carry chronic conditions for a decade or more before death. The gap between the two numbers has become a quiet concern across public health systems. Closing it, rather than simply stretching lifespan further, has become its own kind of ambition. Across developed nations, aging itself stands as the single greatest risk factor behind most chronic disease. Heart conditions, certain cancers, memory disorders, and joint deterioration all rise together as years accumulate. No single behavior explains this pattern as fully as the passage of time does. It has led parts of medicine to ask whether treating aging directly might prevent many diseases at once, rather than treating each separately. Cancer incidence climbs in a curve that steepens sharply with age, rather than rising in a straight line. A body in its 30s faces far lower odds than the same body decades later. Cells accumulate damage year after year, and eventually the odds of a harmful mutation slipping through repair systems increase substantially. The disease, in this sense, is deeply tied to time itself. After the age of 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease roughly doubles every 5 years that follow. A person at 70 faces meaningfully higher odds than someone at 65, and the odds rise again by 75. Researchers still work to fully understand why this particular rhythm holds so consistently across populations. The pattern has made age itself one of the strongest predictors doctors use when assessing memory health. Heart and blood vessel disease remains the leading cause of death among aging populations worldwide. Arteries stiffen, blood pressure climbs, and the heart's own tissue slowly loses some of its youthful elasticity. These changes rarely announce themselves loudly. They accumulate in silence over long stretches of ordinary living. It is a condition woven so deeply into aging that separating the two has proven difficult for medicine. As the body ages, metabolic changes make type 2 diabetes substantially more likely to develop. Cells respond less readily to insulin, and blood sugar regulation grows less precise with each passing decade. Muscle loss and shifting fat distribution both play quiet roles in this shift. It stands as another thread in aging's wide web of interconnected physical change. Feel the weight of your body now, settling fully into whatever is holding it. Notice your feet first, heavy against the sheets, asking nothing more of you. Let that heaviness rise slowly upward, through your legs, your hips, spreading like warmth through your lower back. Your shoulders sink a little further into the mattress. Your arms grow loose and full. Your head rests like something finally set down after a long day of carrying itself. Sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle that comes with age, quietly raises both the risk of falling and the risk of death that follows. Strength that once steadied a person on stairs or uneven ground diminishes without much warning. A fall that a younger body would shrug off can become a serious event later in life. Preserving muscle, researchers now emphasize, may matter as much for survival as for mobility itself. Laboratories around the world are now developing vaccines aimed not at infections, but at diseases of aging itself, including Alzheimer's. Some approaches train the immune system to recognize and clear the sticky protein clumps associated with memory loss. Early trials remain ongoing, and results so far are measured rather than definitive. Still, the approach marks a shift toward treating aging's diseases with tools once reserved only for viruses and bacteria. Population aging is accelerating faster now than at any point in recorded history. What once took centuries to unfold in a society now happens within a single lifetime. Birth rates have fallen while medicine has extended survival, compressing decades of demographic change into mere years. Nations built for youthful populations are adjusting in real time to a world tilting steadily older. By 2050, the number of people over 65 worldwide is projected to roughly double. What was once a modest slice of humanity will become a substantial portion of it. This shift touches nearly every nation, though at different speeds and for different reasons. Cities, economies, and families are all quietly preparing for a demographic landscape unlike any before. Japan holds the highest proportion of elderly citizens anywhere on Earth. Nearly a third of its population has passed the age of 65, reshaping towns, workplaces, and even school buildings repurposed for elder care. Rural villages have grown sparse as younger generations move toward cities. Japan's experience now offers other nations an early glimpse of what widespread longevity looks like in practice. Pension systems across much of the world were designed for lifespans far shorter than people live today. When many of these programs began, retirement often lasted only a handful of years. Now it can stretch across decades, straining financial structures never built for such length. Policymakers face the quiet arithmetic of promises made for one era, now tested by the realities of another. Extending human lifespan could eventually reshape how societies define the age of retirement itself. If healthy years continue to lengthen, the traditional markers of work, rest, and later life may shift along with them. Some nations already study gradually rising retirement ages, as one small adjustment among many. The idea of a fixed number marking life's later chapter may itself become fluid. Healthcare costs rise sharply as populations age, driven largely by chronic disease. Conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and dementia tend to accumulate gradually, requiring sustained care rather than brief intervention. Systems built around acute treatment now stretched to accommodate long-term, ongoing support. The economics of aging are inseparable from the biology that produces them. A silver economy is emerging, built around the needs and desires of older adults. Products once considered niche, from mobility aids to travel services, now represent significant markets. Companies increasingly design with longevity in mind, recognizing that older consumers hold considerable spending power. What was once an overlooked demographic has become an economic force shaping industries worldwide. Multi-generational households may become more common as lifespans extend further. Families increasingly include grandparents, parents, and children living under a single roof, sharing both care and companionship. Economic pressures and longer healthy years both contribute to this shift. Homes designed for one generation are slowly giving way to spaces meant to hold several at once. Somewhere beyond the room, a low hum settles into the walls, arriving and receding like breath. It might be wind against the eaves, or simply the house easing into the night. There is no need to name it, only to let it pass through you. Let your attention drift loosely toward that far, steady sound, following it out past the edges of thought, until even listening becomes unnecessary. Extending healthy lifespan by even a small margin could add trillions of dollars to the global economy. Fewer years lost to illness mean more years of productivity, creativity, and contribution. Economists studying this potential describe it as one of the largest untapped sources of value in modern history. The pursuit of longer, healthier lives carries meaning that reaches far beyond any single body. Economists studying medicine's future often single out one intervention above all others: a cure for aging itself. The reasoning follows simple math. Delaying disease across an entire population multiplies gains that no single treatment could match. A therapy that touched every chronic illness at once, they argue, would dwarf the value of any drug ever developed. Longevity escape velocity names a hypothetical future point where science outruns time itself. The idea suggests that if treatments extend life faster than aging consumes it, remaining years could keep growing rather than running out. It remains a projection, not a proven trajectory. Still, the concept has become a quiet touchstone for researchers imagining what sustained progress might someday allow. Cryonics facilities lower human bodies to temperatures far below freezing, hoping future science might one day restore them. The process aims to halt decay entirely, preserving tissue in a suspended crystalline stillness. Believers see it as a bridge across unfinished medical time. Others view it as an open experiment whose outcome no one alive can yet confirm. To date, no cryonically preserved person has been revived. The technology to reverse such deep cold restoring cells without damage does not yet exist. Every stored body remains exactly that: stored, waiting, unresolved. The gap between preservation and revival stays as wide today as when the first bodies were frozen decades ago. Whole body vitrification offers a different approach than ordinary freezing. Rather than allowing ice crystals to form, researchers replace bodily fluids with protective solutions that turn glass, like under extreme cold. This method aims to avoid the microscopic tearing that ice can cause within cells. Whether it preserves the fine architecture of memory and thought closely enough for future revival remains an open question. Mind uploading imagines identity surviving without a biological body at all. The proposal suggests mapping the brain's structure in enough detail to recreate its patterns within a digital or synthetic system. Whether such a copy would carry the original person's experience or simply resemble it from outside remains unresolved. The idea sits at the far edge of speculation, resting on technology that does not yet exist. Digital immortality proposals set aside the body entirely, focusing instead on consciousness. The goal becomes preserving thought, memory, and personality within some lasting medium, rather than preserving flesh and bone. Supporters describe it as continuity carried by pattern rather than tissue. The approach reframes survival itself, asking what, precisely, needs to persist for a person to remain. Whether digital consciousness could ever equal biological consciousness remains deeply disputed. Some scientists argue that a perfect copy of thought patterns would still lack whatever inner experience makes consciousness what it is. Others hold that pattern alone might be sufficient, given enough fidelity. No experiment yet exists that could settle the disagreement either way. Radical life extension raises a question. Few anticipated whether memory itself has room to grow forever. The brain's storage, however vast, appears finite in its physical structure. Centuries of accumulated experience might eventually strain that capacity in ways poorly understood. Neuroscience offers no settled answer for what would happen to a mind asked to hold an entire unending lifetime. Let warmth begin somewhere small, perhaps the center of your chest, a faint glow settling in like sunlight through a window. Let it spread outward, unhurried, reaching your shoulders, loosening what they carry. Feel it move down through your arms, into your hands, into your fingers rest without effort. Let it travel further still, through your hips, your knees, down to the soles of your feet, until warmth has touched every part of you, and there is only the steady, easeful glow of a body, finally at rest. An aging brain, one still bound by the same biology it began with, may not withstand centuries of continued life. Neurons rarely divide, which leaves them vulnerable to accumulated wear that other cells can simply replace. Whether the brain's architecture could physically sustain an unbroken mind across an indefinite span is unresolved. Neuroscience has no settled position, only competing intuitions about how far neural tissue might bend before it breaks. Periodic memory curation has been proposed as one answer to a brain's limited storage. The idea suggests selectively archiving or releasing old memories, much as a library rotates its shelves to make space for new volumes. Supporters imagine technology someday assisting the mind in choosing what to keep and what to let fade. It remains speculative, resting on tools that do not yet exist outside early theory. Reproductive patterns and family structures could shift considerably in a world without aging. A longer, healthier life might delay childbearing, stretch generations further apart, or blur the boundaries between parent, grandparent, and peer. Families accustomed to a fixed rhythm of growth and passing might instead stretch across centuries. Sociologists can only sketch outlines of what such families might look like, since no society has yet lived this way. Ending aging inevitably raises concerns about how many people the planet could hold. If fewer people die from age-related causes, populations could swell unless birth rates adjust in response. This tension surfaces in nearly every serious conversation about extending human life. It is treated less as a side effect and more as a central challenge demanding its own careful thought. Declining birth rates, already visible across many nations, might offset the population effects of longer lives. Falling fertility has emerged independently of any anti-aging breakthrough driven by economics, education, and shifting priorities. Some demographers argue these two trends, longer life and fewer births, could balance one another over time. Others see the timing as too uncertain to promise any real equilibrium. A world without aging could mean generations no longer replace one another at their familiar pace. Cultural change has often depended on new generations arriving with fresh perspectives and eventually easing older ones aside. If lifespans stretch far beyond what history has known, ideas that once faded with their originators might persist instead, lingering far longer in public life. The turnover of thought itself could slow to an unfamiliar rhythm. Whether life extension technology would reach everyone equally remains a central ethical question. Costly early treatments have historically favored the wealthy before eventually broadening. Ethicists worry that anti-aging medicine, if expensive or scarce, could deepen existing divides between those who age and those who no longer must. The concern is less about the science itself than about who gets to receive it. Universal access frameworks have been proposed by policymakers hoping to prevent a longevity divide from forming. These frameworks imagine treatments distributed as public goods, similar to vaccines or clean water systems, rather than luxury purchases. Whether such systems could realistically keep pace with rapid biotech innovation remains untested. The proposals exist mostly as early blueprints, drawn well before any breakthrough demands them. Across cultures, mortality has never held one single meaning. Some traditions treat death as a passage toward another existence, others as a natural return to the earth, and still others as the very thing that gives life its shape. Philosophy and religion diverge widely on whether death should be feared, welcomed, or transcended altogether. This variety suggests that ending aging would collide with beliefs far older and more varied than the science itself. Certain philosophers argue that mortality itself gives human life its urgency and meaning. Without an end, they suggest, choices might lose their weight, and moments might blur together without the shape that limited time provides. Others push back, insisting meaning could persist, even within an unending life. The debate remains unresolved, resting more on values than on evidence, and perhaps it always will. Dust drifts through a shaft of last light, suspended, going nowhere in particular. Each speck rises, hangs, and falls again, in no hurry to land. Nothing asks it to settle. Let your own weight follow that example, not falling, not floating, just resting in the space between. The light will dim on its own. You don't have to help it. Transhumanism is a movement built on a single conviction: that biology need not be the final word on what a human being can become. Its advocates see aging, illness, and cognitive limits not as fixed truths but as engineering problems awaiting solutions. Technology, in this view, becomes an extension of the body rather than a tool outside it. The movement spans philosophy, medicine, and computer science, united by the hope of transcending inherited limits. Longevity advocacy groups spend their energy on a quiet but ambitious goal: convincing regulators to classify aging itself as a treatable condition. Right now, no major health authority recognizes aging as a disease, which limits funding and clinical trial design. Advocates argue this classification could unlock resources on the scale devoted to cancer or heart disease. Their lobbying is patient work, built more on persistence than spectacle. Biological age itself is increasingly proposed as a new yardstick for medicine, replacing the birthday-based number most systems still rely on. It reflects how a body actually functions, drawn from blood markers, demethylation, and organ performance rather than years past. Two people born the same year might carry biological ages a decade apart. Insurers and physicians alike are watching this shift with growing interest. Insurance industries are beginning to explore models where risk is priced not by calendar years, but by biological markers of wear. Early pilots use blood tests and cellular clocks to estimate a policyholder's true physiological age. If this becomes standard, premiums could shift from broad averages toward individual biology. The change is slow, tentative, and still confined mostly to research divisions rather than public policy. Legal definitions of death may require revision if medicine someday keeps biological decline permanently at bay. Most legal systems define death through the irreversible loss of brain or cardiac function, concepts built around an aging trajectory that once felt inevitable. If that trajectory changes, the boundary between alive and dead could blur in ways law has never had to consider. Courts have not yet faced this question directly. Extended legal personhood is a framework. Some legal scholars have begun sketching for a future where lifespans stretch well beyond current norms. Questions arise about inheritance, retirement law, and even voting eligibility if a person's active life spans centuries rather than decades. These proposals remain theoretical, discussed mostly in academic papers rather than legislatures. Still, the questions they raise are already reshaping how some institutions plan ahead. Environmental scientists raise a different kind of concern, whether the planet's resources could sustain a population that no longer declines through aging. Food systems, water supplies, and land use were shaped around cycles of birth and death now familiar for generations. Removing the second half of that cycle changes the math considerably. No clear answer exists yet, only careful modeling and cautious projection. Off-world colonization has been proposed by some as a long-term answer to the pressure a non-aging population might place on Earth. Mars settlements, orbital habitats, and even generational ships appear in these discussions as pressure valves rather than final destinations. The idea remains largely speculative, resting on technologies not yet built at scale. Still, it surfaces often in conversations about where an ageless humanity might eventually live. Space travel introduces its own aging-related challenges, layered atop the biological ones already being studied on Earth. Cosmic radiation damages DNA more aggressively beyond the planet's protective magnetic field, accelerating certain kinds of cellular wear. Astronauts on long missions have shown changes resembling accelerated aging in some tissues. Any future among the stars would have to solve two aging problems at once, not just one. Weightlessness changes the body in ways that resemble aging sped forward. Astronauts lose bone density at rates far faster than any elderly person on Earth, sometimes losing in a month what takes a year on solid ground. Muscles weaken without gravity's constant resistance to push against. Researchers watch these shifts closely, hoping the body's adaptation to space might also reveal something about the slower drift of aging down here. Let your jaw loosen now, just slightly, as if it forgot what it was holding. The muscles around your eyes can soften too, releasing whatever small tension gathered there through the day. Behind your closed eyelids, there is only a warm, formless dark, wide, and unbothered. Let your face rest the way still water rests, with nothing asking anything of it. There is no expression to keep, just this stillness spreading downward from your brow. Telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, shift measurably during long stays in orbit. Some astronauts show lengthening while in space, followed by rapid shortening again after return to Earth. The reasons remain unclear, tangled somewhere between radiation, fluid shifts, and the strange physiology of living without weight. It is one of the more puzzling findings in space medicine, a reminder that biology behaves differently once gravity is removed from the equation. Extreme files, organisms built for the harshest environments imaginable, draw growing attention from biologists studying damage resistance. Creatures that endure boiling vents, Arctic ice, or crushing pressure seem to have found ways of protecting their molecular machinery that most life forms never develop. Some scientists study these organisms hoping their strategies might translate, however distantly, into new ways of shielding human cells from the wear that accumulates with time. Tardigrades, tiny eight-legged creatures barely visible to the eye, can survive being dried to almost nothing and exposed to radiation that would destroy most living tissue. They enter a suspended state, curling into a dormant form until moisture returns, then unfurl again as if no time had passed. Their cells repair damage on a scale that still puzzles biologists. Something in their chemistry resists destruction in ways human cells simply cannot yet match. Bioengineers now speculate, cautiously, about redesigning human biology at its most fundamental level to resist decay altogether. The idea involves rewriting genetic instructions so cells repair damage more completely, more consistently, across an entire lifetime. Such changes remain theoretical, existing mostly in research proposals and early laboratory experiments. Still, the ambition itself marks a shift from treating aging symptoms toward reconsidering the blueprint underneath them. Synthetic biology imagines tissues built not just to function, but to repair themselves continuously, much like a wound that never stops quietly healing. Engineered cells might one day sense damage and respond automatically, patching breaks in DNA or clearing worn-out proteins before they accumulate. Such tissue does not yet exist outside early laboratory models, but the underlying vision of living material that maintains itself indefinitely continues to draw serious scientific interest. Nanotechnology offers another vision entirely, one where microscopic machines drift through the bloodstream performing continuous repair. Some scientists envision devices small enough to enter individual cells, correcting errors as they arise rather than waiting for damage to build. The technology remains almost entirely theoretical today, yet the appeal is easy to understand, a kind of endless, invisible maintenance crew working quietly within the body. Molecular nanomachines have been proposed as a way to clear the kind of damage natural repair mechanisms consistently miss. The body's own systems, remarkable as they are, leave behind small residues over decades, stray proteins and structural debris that quietly accumulate. Engineers imagine machines fine enough to locate and remove this residue at the molecular scale. Nothing like this exists yet, but the concept persists as a long-term aspiration in longevity research. Whole genome synthesis, the ability to write an organism's entire genetic code from scratch, could someday allow scientists to design life without the genes associated with aging altogether. Such a project remains far beyond current capability, requiring both technical precision and a far deeper understanding of which genes cause decline. Still, researchers occasionally sketch what such an organism might look like, a body built, quite literally, from the ground up to endure. Negligible senescence, so far seen only in certain reptiles and fish, has inspired a bolder idea. A number of theorists propose that if enough of the mechanisms already discovered were combined, cellular repair, senescent cell clearance, mitochondrial renewal, something resembling that state might be engineered into human biology. No such combination has been achieved, but the hypothesis reframes aging not as fixed, but as a set of separable problems, each theoretically solvable on its own. No proof yet exists that aging can be eliminated entirely, and that absence matters. Every laboratory success, longer-lived mice, repaired mitochondria, cleared senescent cells, addresses one piece of a much larger puzzle. None has produced an organism free of decline altogether. The honest state of the science is incremental progress alongside an unanswered question, one that remains open no matter how many individual mechanisms are understood. Let your breath find its own rhythm now without any effort to guide it. Notice how each inhale arrives on its own, and each exhale lasts a little longer than the one before. There is no pattern to follow, only the one already happening inside you. Let it lengthen further, unhurried, spreading warmth through your chest with every slow release. Follow it down, down, past waking, into rest. The scientific community remains divided on whether aging can ever be stopped in full. Some researchers see incremental extension as the realistic ceiling, healthier decades, but decline eventually. Others argue that biology, once understood deeply enough, has no reason to resist indefinite repair. Neither position claims certainty. The debate itself, ongoing and unresolved, reflects how much remains unknown about the limits of a living system. Evolution, a number of biologists argue, never had a reason to build bodies for indefinite lifespan. Its only measure of success was reproduction, passing genes forward before failure set in. Once offspring were raised, the body's continued survival offered little further evolutionary value. Longevity, by this view, was never the goal. It was simply whatever happened to remain functional after the more urgent task was already complete. Antagonistic pleiotropy describes a strange inheritance written into many genes. A gene that strengthens fertility or vitality in youth may, decades later, contribute to disease or decline. The same instruction that once served the body well can quietly work against it in later years. Evolution favored the early benefit and left the later cost unaddressed, since by then its evolutionary purpose had already been fulfilled. Disposable soma theory imagines the body as a kind of budget, constantly deciding where to spend limited resources. Investing heavily in reproduction early often means investing less in long-term cellular repair. The body, in this view, was never built to last forever, only long enough to pass life onward. What looks like decline may simply be the visible cost of that ancient trade. A humanity without aging would likely need to rebuild many of the milestones tied to age itself. Retirement, schooling, marriage timing, even ideas of adulthood, all currently rest on the assumption of a body that visibly changes over decades. Remove that visible change, and the old markers lose their meaning. Entire social structures, quietly built around biological decline, would need new foundations to stand on. Cultural stories about youth and elderhood could shift profoundly if biological aging were ever ended. Wisdom traditionally tied to a lined face or slowed pace might need new expression entirely. Youth, no longer temporary, might lose some of its urgency and romance. What a culture calls old or young has always depended on visible time passing. Remove that visibility, and the stories built around it would need to be told anew. A number of futurists envision something they call chronological diversity, a society where age no longer predicts health, ability, or appearance. In such a world, a person's years lived would say little about their body's condition. Communities might contain people of vastly different chronological ages who look, move, and function almost identically. Age, once a visible marker of time, would become simply a number, disconnected from how a life is actually lived. Even a body freed from aging would remain a body in the world, and the world holds risks that biology alone cannot soften. A fall, a fever, a moment of violence, an illness born outside the cells themselves, these could still end a life. Ending aging would not mean ending mortality. It would only change the shape of the risks a long life must still pass through, one ordinary day after another. A number of biologists urge caution, warning that stopping aging entirely might carry costs no one has yet mapped. Systems shaped by billions of years of trade, OFS may not release one thread without disturbing others nearby. Removing decline could ripple outward in ways biology has never been asked to reveal. Caution here is not fear, only humility before a system deeper than current understanding. Whether humanity could ever truly live without aging remains one of science's most open questions, unanswered by any single experiment or theory. It touches biology, ethics, and the deep architecture of life itself, and no field claims the final word. Somewhere between what is known and what is only imagined, the question waits patiently, unresolved. And here, on this ordinary night, wondering is enough. Rest now. Let the question stay open. Good night.